So you want to learn how to align your car. I'm gonna show you how to do that. Maybe you don't know how, maybe you already know how. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe your steering wheel's crooked and you don't know why. I don't know. But I'm gonna show you how to align your car with some toe plates. Hopefully you can't hear it in the video, but the rain is pouring. So what you want to do is grab your jack. Yeah. You want to grab your jack, you're going to grab your... Let's start out with grabbing the jack. Get the jack in. So the crap part about all this is all my tools are in the trailer, which means I'm gonna have to get wet. Alright, so you got your tools, whatever you need to take your wheel off, you got your car jacked up. So now, take the wheel off, right? Put it somewhere comfortable, because you're gonna want it there. So what you should do now is disconnect both tie rods. I'm only gonna do one side because, pro tip, don't buy spline sockets, they suck. They get stuck in here. So I'm only gonna do one side, but you'll get the point. Take both tie rods off. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna go all the way right. You know, here, let me see if I can do that. So you go all the way to the right. We'll say that's the right. Okay, so that spoke sticking up, blah, blah, blah. This is just to give you an idea. What we're going to do here is we're going to count the full amount of turns at the rack with the tie rods unhooked. That means that nothing like your knuckles will interfere. It's the rack only. So you can turn this wheel all the way until it stops. Okay, well, I'm not going to actually do this perfect because my car's not jacked up all the way. But say the spoke is up here and say it was 3 full turns. You know, 3 full turns this way. What you would do at that point is go, we'll call this the section. There's 1 turn. Then you go a half of a turn. That splits the difference. That means that's the center of your rack. So with your rack centered, some people actually sell some people sell little slip-on things like Chad sells them for BMWs. That'll just center the rack for you. You just pull your inner tire boots off. That'll center the rack, takes away all the question, it holds it at center. It's actually something you should buy. Now that you got your rack centered, what you can do is hook your tie rods back up. Now you need to center your tie rods. So what this means is, this is where a lot of people mess up. You can have a 1/4 inch of toe out, right? Well, that 1/4 inch of toe out could be just this side. And for all you know, in your measurement, you think it's both sides. So you go and adjust, you know, your passenger side and you adjust this side. But in reality, that means your steer ahead. Let me see if I can. That means your steer ahead is incorrect. So what you want is straight ahead like this with both. If you got a 1/4 inch of toe out, it could just be like this. It could just be this a 1/4 inch. So say you want to take that into 0, you pull this one in an 1/8, but then you also pull this one in an 1/8, and now you got 0 toe, but this one's still an 1/8 out, and this one's an 1/8 in. So your car's not going to drive straight. It's not going to act the way you want. So what I do is, you know, now that we centered the rack, I will take and measure any point, right? So let's give a reference here. My phone might die. I hope I get this done. I can't turn my light on. Maybe you can see it there. So right there is a subframe bolt. That subframe bolt is going to be the same on both sides of the car, and I know that. This might take you some time to find something that's on the chassis that's the same on both sides, But that's what you need to do, because what we're going to do now is measure from this stud to, let's just use this as an example, to the face of the rotor right, I got not enough hands, right there. All right, so you got, let's just call that 17 1/4. My phone is shutting down. My phone died. So pretend we went to the other side, and from the subframe stud to here, it's 17 1/4. So now we've matched both tie rods, the lengths. So we know that any adjustment from this point on, we can make evenly. What that means is, like I was explaining earlier, now I know that my, let's call it my steer ahead, is even. Whether that's here, here, or straight, they're the same. So from this point on, now, if I were to have a 1/4 inch of toe out, you know, both of these, that would mean that I would need to take 1/8 out of this side and 1/8 out of this side to get 0. An easy way to do that is, there's always different thread pitches, there's always different sizes. The size doesn't matter so much as the pitch, but the amount of turns you get out of here, out of your inner tie rod, this is the inner tie rod, the amount of turns that you get out of here will be different on every vehicle. Maybe you're some wizard and you get it right on your car over and over again. Whatever, that's besides the point. So, you put a wrench on here, right? Your wrench is straight up and down here. What I do is, we're going to use a 1/4 inch toe out as an example. I'm just going to go ahead and turn this wrench from up here and go all the way down. Just do a 180 with it. And then I'm going to go to the other side, I'm going to do the exact same thing, so it's repeatable. So once again, now we're reminded that both sides are being adjusted evenly. So you can use this method to get to wherever you want. I recommend starting with 1/8 or 1/4 inch toe out. Preferably, I say 1/4. Just go right for the big number. Run a 1/4 inch of toe out on most vehicles. On pretty much every vehicle that applies. If the car feels like it's too twitchy, go to an 1/8 inch toe out. This is kind of basic. I mean, a lot of things make a difference, and personally, I don't feel a difference between a 1/4 inch and an 1/8, front toe out. Some people do, but either way, that's the baseline. You probably don't want to run 0, but the idea behind running a little bit toe out is that the car is going to be a little twitchier because your lead wheel, so your lead wheel will be at angle, but your chase wheel will be towed out, so it'll want to spring back the other way faster, self-steered. Right, so let's go over everything. Jack the car up, centered the rack, centered the tie rods, found a good point to measure from, measured that, we adjusted both tie rods to be even on both sides. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put this wheel back on the car, and then we're going to put some toe plates on it, and then we're going to see what the toe actually is. So we're back in the car now. So I know that this little mark right here is my center of the rack. As you can see, which is a lot of people's cases, my steering wheel, it is not the steering wheel that's crooked, it is actually the hub adapters on the splines incorrectly. So this is my center. If your steering wheel is still crooked even though you found the center of your rack, put a piece of tape on it or draw a line on the center, something like that. So wheels back on, car's on the ground, we're about to load the toe plates up. Shout out BC Racing. These are my toe plates. I'm pretty sure I got these from Chad. There's another reference to Chad. Chad makes everything. So we're gonna keep using that other side. I think it's pretty important to try to center these slots. I usually will just go off of this with the center of my hub. It doesn't have to be perfect, unless you want it to be. We'll call this center. So now what you're gonna do is take your tape measure. That's what these slots are for. There you go. That's what it does. So you'll feed this guy all the way to the other side of the car. And then you'll lock it in. So imagine we're on the other side. You fed your tape through. You're gonna pull it tight. And then you're gonna make sure that you got a buddy. If you don't have a buddy, what you can do is be just super gentle. So I'm gonna feed this through. We'll take a measurement on one side. We'll take a measurement on the other side, and we'll get after what my toe situation's like. You really just want to make sure you got this thing flush up against the wheel. If you watched any other videos I've made, you probably realize I'm unorganized. So what I'm gonna say is, I'm unorganized. I only got one tape measure. I lost the other ones that I bought specifically for doing this. Alright, so we pull this tight, as you can see. I have 74 in the front. That is actually not correct because I can't do this by myself. It keeps falling out. But I'll run this through and give you guys an example. Either way. So the front's at 74. You got to remember that. So let's go ahead and say that the rear is a 74 and 1/8. So what that means is that you have, we'll go back to the fingers for this. You have a bigger number, a bigger distance to travel in the rear of your wheels, which would mean that you have toe in. The tips of my fingers are the front of the car. So right now we got a measurement of 74 in the front and 74 and 1/8 in the rear, which means that your wheels are doing this. So what we would do at this point is we would go right back to referencing how I said you would adjust your tie rods evenly, and you're going to take a 16th this way and a 16th that way if you want 0. And this is something to remember too. If you say, we'll go back to that, if you have a 1/4 inch of toe in or out, you got to remember that there's 2 wheels. So what you're going to do is you're going to split that in half, and you would do X amount of adjustment over here and X amount of adjustment over there. You know, so what did I just say? Of course, so you do eighth on one side, 1/8 on the other, and that should get you to 0 if that's what your goal is. Hopefully that makes sense. So, yep, we'll do it this way too, just to show. So if I were to have this number right here, so that's 73 3/4, and let's still assume that I got 74 up here in the front. What that means is, the opposite of what I just said. So now I have a 1/4 inch of toe out. So that, in my opinion, that's what I run. I wouldn't touch anything. But if you wanted to go 1/8 of toe out, that would look like, so there's a 1/4. You just go in that little bit. But in order to get there, you'd have to adjust those inner tie rods a 16th on each side. So that's really it. Oh, maybe I should go into like caster and camber. Yeah, we'll do that. So that's how you do toe. That's how you do toe. I don't know, I feel like I explained it good enough. Hopefully you get it. If you don't, comment and tell me what you don't understand. So we're gonna move on to camber. Bang. Now you got yourself a camber plate. Make sure that this boy is sitting flush up against there. Camber isn't really, it's not super important to know the specific number. So what I do is I just use an app on my phone, or at work. If I'm at work, we have a angle gauge there, or digital angle finder. But anyways, yeah, camber. Put the boy on there. I can't show you how to do that. If this side's 4 degrees, you go over there, do 4 degrees. Ideally, on most setups, you really want, I would say, 4.5 to 7 degrees of camber. In my experience, 7 degrees of camber is typically a lot. 4 is typically not enough. On this car, I run 5.5 degrees, negative, obviously, and it's been great. And the next thing would be caster. And so I'll show you how to do caster, and then I'll show you the correct way to do. There's an order to those three: to caster, camber, tow. Well, that's actually exactly how it goes. Typically on an alignment rack, you would do caster, camber, tow, but because we don't have lasers or racks, so what I do is I'll set the camber, then I'll do the caster, because you actually use the camber to find your caster, and then I'll do tow. So to do caster, all you're looking at here is the same thing with this. You got yourself your camber, right? I just said that you use camber to adjust caster, or to find what you use camber to find what your caster is. So, however you're gonna figure out how to do this is kind of the hard part. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go 20 degrees left and 20 degrees right on this wheel, this driver wheel. And we're gonna take the difference of our camber readings, and that will actually give us caster. So I think 20 degrees is usually 3/4 of a turn. So what I mean by that is, we'll go back to this reference. So 3/4 of a turn left would be, take this guy and go, that's half a turn, and that's 3/4 of a turn, because 1 full turn would be there, right? Duh. So you'd go all your 3/4 left. So this tire, as you can see, is starting to lay flat. So you'll get a number closer to 0 when you're going this way with the wheel. And then what we'll do is we'll take this measurement, let's call this in 2 degrees positive. Hopefully I remember that. So we'll come back in, we jotted that down. And now we're gonna go 3/4 of a turn the other way. And it got a bunch of stuff over there. So, obviously now we're gaining negative camber. So we're gaining negative camber at this point. Let's say that this is -6 degrees. So at this point we have, let me turn the camera around. So at this point we have 2 readings. We went 20 degrees to the left, we got 2 degrees positive camber. We went 20 degrees to the right, we got 6 degrees negative. So like I said before, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that difference. So you go from 2 degrees positive to 0, that's 2. And then you need to go from 0 to -6. So what is that number? That's 8. That means you have 8 degrees of caster. It's as simple as that. You really don't need to overthink it. If you start getting into halves and stuff like that, just use your calculator. As far as caster goes, that's it. So yeah, I showed you how to do caster, I showed you how to do camber, I showed you how to do tow. So let's get into, we'll get into the ideal way to adjust your camber if you're new to this. So ideally what you would do at this point when you're starting out, you wanna figure out where your camber should be. You're gonna wanna turn your wheel to full lock. This is not full lock. You would wanna turn your wheel to full lock. And then at that point you will notice that you will have this tire will be laying this way, not straight up and down like this. So your tire will not be straight up and down, aka a flat contact patch. It will be laying on this outer edge at full lock, typically. What I like to do is, I like to go to full lock and then come back a little bit, because more than likely, unless you're a baller, and especially if you're new to drifting, you're not going to be driving on full lock all the time. So you ideally want your flat contact patch. You can see I'm still a little negative here. You want your flat contact patch to be where you're driving angle-wise most of the time. So on this car, that's 5.5 degrees negative. So from this point, you've adjusted your camber at your top hat. Alright, so as far as the front goes, I've given you a basic idea where your toe should be. I showed you how to measure caster. As far as caster goes, that number is pretty different for different cars, and it does different things for different cars. On this car, I run 7.5. I run 7.5 degrees. From what I've gathered, the closer I go to 0 caster, the snappier this car will be. I'd like to go more to like 6.5, but I'll probably go to 7 at some point whenever I decide to realign the car. But I know on 350Zs, from what I remember, I think they run 9.5 or 11 degrees. I think stock is 9 on a 350Z. But that's something you should look up. You know, if you're trying to align your car in general, you should reach out or do a Google search and figure out what most people are running with your car as far as alignment specs go. I'll go over the rear just a little bit. I'll touch on that. But this is pretty much it. Buy yourself some toe plates, get yourself 2 tape measures, and really, if you can, buy an angle finder. That'll make getting camber a lot easier than trying to use your phone. So typically when you get to 0 degrees of camber on most cars, it always ends up looking like it's positive. Something good to just, yeah, this just goes back to the research thing. So S chassis toe out as the suspension squats. So on my car, I think I run a 1/2 inch of toe in, unweighted or unsquatted. So when it squats in, it ends up going to around 1/4. And you can measure that, but that kind of is a whole nother thing to talk about. Right now, we're just trying to get to the basics. We're trying to get you set up good to get drifting, and then just learn whatever you want from there. So yeah, some cars toe in under squatting, some cars toe out. I guess a good way to look at it is you can just put the shit at 0. You can just put the stuff at 0, and then it is what it is. I always tell people a good rule of thumb for the rear of the car: 0 everything out. 0 camber, 0 toe. Toe doesn't really affect tire wear too much in the rear, but camber will. I've noticed a difference at a lot of, if you're running track with more bank and with a lot of bank, you might not want positive 1/2 degree of camber. You might want 0. That way that outer tire doesn't wear as much. If you're doing more left-hand turns, you might want to adjust to one side. Let's not focus on that though. What I think is best is I set this car at positive 1/2 degree of camber. And I went to the track and I noticed, I didn't go to one track, I went to a few tracks, and I noticed, just pay attention how your tires are wearing. So say if the outside's wearing a little bit and you've driven all these tracks and it seems pretty consistent, just bring it a little more negative so that you get it flat. And then, keep trying that, but just keep track of that. As you make an adjustment, jot down what you adjusted it to after you made your first adjustment. And then at that point, you'll know, okay, well, this is my go-to flat contact patch. I'm not good at this. I'm trying to think. So I did everything in the front. That's the basis of the rear. Something you should talk about. Rear adjustable arms. Let me see if I have one. So rear adjustable arms. This is something that is a pretty big deal. I've noticed in a lot of cars, cough cough Ryan, is when people do rear alignments, what they do is they will leave this nut or this thread all the way in and then just adjust this all the way out. What that does is this rod right here, this outer joint, is only so long. So when you leave this one all the way in and you adjust this all the way out, your thread engagement, your thread engagement is minimal, which means it's weaker. What you want to do is you want to split the difference. If you need to adjust this point from here to here an inch, you're going to want to divide that up between this one and this one so you get as much strength as you can out of these joints. That's really it with that. I mean, that kind of applies to everything as far as the car goes. Trying to make sure it's square on both sides, or you're adjusting things evenly. Hopefully you guys learned something from that. If you didn't, tell me I suck. I don't know. I do know, actually. I don't care. But hopefully this helps. That's it. Bye.